Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'll be showing you how to make a homemade fruit tart. Hey Sugar Spun Bakers, Sam here, and today I am going to be showing you how to make a refreshing fruit tart completely from scratch. Maybe you've grabbed one of these from the supermarket before, but nothing compares to making your own at home. Now, there are three main components to a good fruit tart. First is the pastry crust, second is the pastry cream, and third, of course, is the fruit topping, which you have a little bit of wiggle room there. You can use your favorite. Let's go ahead and get started by making the pastry cream. Now you want to make the pastry cream first because it takes at least 2 hours for the cream to chill before you can put it in your tart. Let's head over to the stovetop. This pastry cream is similar to the one I've already shared on my blog, except it's scaled down a little bit so that it fits perfectly into our tart crust. We're going to start by adding a half cup of milk and 2/3 cup of heavy cream into our saucepan. We'll also be adding 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, as well as a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And we'll stir this over medium heat, and you're going to want to stir it pretty much constantly until the sugar dissolves and the mixture comes to a simmer. Whatever you do, do not crank up your stovetop heat to be above medium. What you'll end up doing that way is burning your mixture. The sugar won't dissolve properly and your pastry cream won't set up. So try to be patient. Now once this is simmering, we're going to remove it from the heat, set it aside, and let that cool for at least 10 minutes. Now while that is cooling, you're going to want to grab a clean, medium-sized bowl, and into this we are going to be adding 3 large egg yolks. Ideally, these should be at room temperature. Here we're going to be adding another 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Just whisk these together vigorously for about 15 seconds until that sugar begins to dissolve. Now we're going to whisk in 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. And just keep on whisking everything together until all of your ingredients are combined and the mixture begins to slightly thicken. So at this point, your cream mixture has had a little bit of time to cool. You want to let it sit for at least 10 minutes. We have to combine our cream mixture and our egg yolk mixture, but we want to do this carefully. That way we don't end up cooking and curdling our eggs. So the way to do this is I like to grab a measuring cup. This is a 1/3 cup measuring cup, and just scoop some of that cream mixture. And while I'm whisking the egg mixture, I'm just going to slowly drizzle that cream in with the egg mixture. Now this is called tempering, and this slowly combines the 2 ingredients without cooking any of our eggs. Now we can slowly drizzle in the rest of our cream mixture. Remember to keep whisking while you're doing this. Now don't get rid of that saucepan, because once everything is nicely combined, we're going to pour our egg/cream mixture back into our saucepan, and we're going to take that back over to the stovetop. Set your stovetop heat to medium, and you're going to want to stir this just about constantly until it begins to thicken. Again, keep that heat on medium, or if you're worried about it, even medium-low. That way you don't risk burning your cream. Now, just in case any of our egg yolk did get cooked, or in case there are any little lumps for the cornstarch in our mixture, I like to use a fine mesh strainer and hold this over a heat-proof bowl, or rest it over a heat-proof bowl. And I'm going to pour that hot cream mixture carefully through the strainer. We're going to add a little bit of butter to our pastry cream. It's going to add a nice richness. You'll need 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Preferably, this should be softened. And I'm just going to cube it into 4 pieces and whisk each piece in one at a time. Ooh, your butter does not have to be quite this soft. Oh my gosh. Finally, I'm just going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now let this cool at room temperature for about 30 minutes. You'll want to stir it occasionally to prevent a skin from forming. And then we'll grab a piece of plastic wrap, and we're going to press this directly against the surface of the pastry cream. This is going to keep a skin from forming while our pastry cream is chilling. If you don't want to use plastic wrap, you could instead use parchment paper or wax paper. That would be fine. We'll take this over to our fridge, where it's going to need to chill for at least 2 to 4 hours before we can use it in our fruit tart. Now while that is chilling, let's go ahead and make our tart crust. Today I'm using a very classic sweet tart dough. I'm going to be making mine in the food processor, but if you don't have one, you can instead use a pastry cutter. We'll combine 1½ cups of all-purpose flour, a 1/2 cup of powdered sugar, also known as icing sugar, and just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We'll just briefly pulse these ingredients together until they're nicely combined. Next, we're going to add 8 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Now you want this to be nice and cold, and I actually like to toss mine in the freezer for about 15 to 20 minutes before I begin making the tart crust. I'm just going to scatter this evenly over the top of the flour mixture. I'll pulse this about 10 times until the butter is nicely distributed, but you should still be able to see some butter pieces. The mixture will kind of resemble coarse crumbs. You don't want to overdo it, otherwise your tart dough won't be as flaky as it ought to be. Ought, there's a word I don't use every day. My food processor is facing you, so that was a little backwards for me, and I did not pulse it for the first time. Make sure you are pulsing your mixture. Things got a little bit crazy there. All right, let me show you what the consistency looks like. Coarse crumbs, you can still see some butter. In a small bowl, we are going to combine 1 large egg and a half teaspoon of vanilla extract. Just lightly scramble these together. Drizzle this over your flour mixture. Pulse everything together again until the mixture is just beginning to combine. It'll look pretty crumbly. I usually only go for about 16 to 20 pulses. Now, if your dough is too dry and it is just not coming together, you can add a tablespoon of cold, heavy cream at this point. Our mixture is just beginning to cling together. You can see if I take it in my hand, it holds together nicely. I'm going to transfer this over to a clean piece of plastic wrap. This dough is already a little bit softer than I ideally like it to be, so I don't want to handle it too much. I'm actually going to use the plastic wrap to form it into a disc. Now, if yours is still a little bit crumbly, you can lightly flour your hands and use your hands to work it together. Now this dough is going to need to chill in the refrigerator for 1 hour. Once your dough is chilled, we're going to transfer it to a clean, lightly floured surface and roll it out to about a 10 to 11 inch circle. Roll it up, and I'm going to transfer it to my 9-inch tart pan. Now with this dough, you could also make a 10-inch tart instead, or even an 8-inch tart. You would just have less or more filling respectively. Now you want to be careful handling this dough. You don't want to punch any holes in it, and just carefully press it into the sides of your pan. Carefully trim that excess dough. The easiest way I've found to do this is just use my rolling pin and lightly roll it across the top of the tart pan. Now use a fork to prick the surface of the tart crust. Cover the surface of your tart crust with a piece of parchment paper. And you want to use a little bit more parchment paper than you actually need, because after the tart has baked, we're going to need to grab these edges and easily lift out our pie wheats. And then fill this with either pie wheats, or you can use dry beans instead. Before baking this crust, I recommend transferring it to your freezer, and you'll want to let it chill for 30 minutes. This is going to prevent it from shrinking. While the dough is chilling, preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Once your tart dough has chilled for at least 30 minutes, we'll transfer this to our 375 degree Fahrenheit preheated oven, where we will first bake it for about 20 minutes, and then we'll remove the weights and cook for another 5 minutes or until the entire crust is a light golden brown. You can place your tart pan in the oven exactly as it is, but because the bottom's separate, I like to place mine on a cookie sheet before baking it. Just makes it easier to get it in and out of the oven. You can absolutely serve your fruit tart right in this pan, but I like to transfer mine to a nice serving platter once it's cooled. You want to be careful with it, but it should slide right off. One of the worst things that can happen to a fruit tart is it can get soggy from the pastry cream and the fruit we're adding on top. We are going to be preventing this by adding a nice chocolate shell into our crust. Now we're going to coat the whole surface with a thin layer of chocolate. This is 1/4 cup of melted semi-sweet chocolate chips. I'm just going to spread it evenly over the crust. This will keep any moisture from getting onto the crust, so it'll stay nice and flaky and buttery. I like to use a pastry brush just to get up the sides because you don't want to forget about those. You'll want this chocolate layer to harden before you add your pastry cream. I'm just going to pop it in the fridge. Since it's such a thin layer, it's only going to take about 5 to 10 minutes for that to be nice and firm. Once the chocolate's firm, we can assemble our tart. Grab your pastry cream from the fridge. It should be nice and chilled by now, and spread that evenly into your tart shell. You can decorate your fruit tart with whatever fruits you like. Today, I'm just using strawberries, blueberries, and raspberries. If you want to give your fruit tart that extra shiny glaze on top that you see in most bakeries, you'll just want to take a spoonful of apple jelly and combine that with just a tiny splash of water. Stir it together a little bit just to break it up a tiny bit, and then you'll just want to microwave this until it's melted and smooth. Then just use a clean pastry brush to gently brush the glaze over your fruit. As you can see, it's more of a dabbing motion than a brushing motion. And that is how you make a fruit tart completely from scratch. I hope you guys enjoyed today's recipe, and if you like this one, you are going to love my cream puff recipe where I use the exact same pastry cream filling. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.